Imagine a world untouched by machines, no cities glowing with electricity, no airplanes roaring above the clouds, no skyscrapers touching the sky. A time when humanity had just begun to gather in villages, when survival depended on hunting, farming, and the mercy of nature. And yet, even in those earliest days, long before nuclear weapons, long before World War shook the earth, the seeds of violence and conflict had already been planted. This is the untold story of the world's very first war, the moment when human beings turned from survival against nature to survival against each other, when for the first time, war became a chapter in our history. The question arises, why would humans, still so close to the edge of extinction, choose to fight one another instead of working together? The answer lies deep in human instincts. At first, conflicts were small. One tribe clashed with another over hunting grounds, water, or fertile soil. Evidence from archaeological digs shows skeletons pierced by arrows, skulls cracked by blunt weapons, and mass graves where dozens of individuals were buried together, all showing signs of violent death. These were not accidents. These were not individual killings. These were the shadows of organized violence, the echoes of the first wars in human history. Archaeologists have found one of the earliest sites of mass conflict in Jebel Sahaba near the Nile, dating back more than 13,000 years. Here, dozens of skeletons were discovered with stone arrowheads embedded in their bones. Men, women, even children were victims. This was not a random act but a systematic battle between groups, probably over scarce resources during a time when the environment was harsh and food was limited. This discovery tells us that even in the Stone Age, humans were capable of organized violence, capable of war. As time passed, tribes grew into settlements, and settlements into cities. With agriculture, humans no longer roamed freely. They claimed land, cultivated crops, and protected them fiercely. Once people began to build walls and borders, the idea of defending territory was born. And with it came the ambition to expand territory as well. The first great civilizations rose in Mesopotamia, the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians created kingdoms that not only advanced writing, law, and architecture but also became pioneers in the art of war. Cuneiform tablets describe kings marching into battle with thousands of soldiers, wielding spears, axes, and primitive shields. Armies were no longer just groups of hunters. They were trained forces led by rulers who sought power and dominance. One of the earliest recorded wars took place between the Sumerian city-states of Lagash and Umma around 2450 BC. The Stele of the Vultures, an ancient carved stone monument, tells the story of this bloody conflict. Soldiers are depicted in formation, spears raised, trampling their enemies. This was war in its earliest organized form, not just chaos but planned destruction. Here we see the beginning of tactics, strategy, and propaganda, where leaders glorified their victories and etched their power into stone for all time. But perhaps the most famous first recorded battle in history was the Battle of Megiddo. Fought in 1479 BC, Pharaoh Thutmose III of Egypt led his armies against a coalition of Canaanite kings who had rebelled against Egyptian rule. Ancient Egyptian records describe how the battle unfolded, with detailed accounts of troop movements and the pharaoh's courage. The Egyptians emerged victorious, and Megiddo became a symbol of military power. It was the first battle that was not only fought but written down, preserved for future generations to study. And from that moment, war became a defining element of human civilization. What made these wars happen? The reasons were surprisingly similar to the ones that drive conflicts even today. Resources were limited, and control of fertile land or trade routes could mean the difference between prosperity and famine. Leaders sought glory and expansion, craving the legacy of conquest. Religion and belief systems added fuel, as gods and kings demanded loyalty and sacrifice. And, most of all, fear of enemies drove societies to strike before being struck, beginning a cycle of violence that has never truly ended. Weapons themselves evolved alongside war. From sharpened stones and wooden clubs, humans advanced to bronze weapons, swords, daggers, and axes forged in fire. The invention of the chariot changed the battlefield forever. Armies that mastered the horse-drawn chariot dominated their rivals, raining arrows down upon foot soldiers with terrifying speed. Strategy and technology became as important as courage. War was no longer simply about survival, it was about innovation, dominance, and legacy. These early wars reshaped societies. Victories brought wealth, slaves, and expanded territories, while defeats meant destruction and assimilation. Empires rose and fell on the edge of the sword. The Assyrians, for example, built one of the most feared military machines of the ancient world, mastering siege warfare, iron weapons, and psychological terror. They were known to leave piles of severed heads outside conquered cities, a brutal message that resistance was useless. The concept of total war destroying not just armies but entire populations was already alive thousands of years ago. And yet, even in this darkness, war pushed humanity forward. Weapons and military organization led to advancements in metallurgy, engineering, and governance. To maintain armies, rulers created taxation systems and laws. Roads and fortresses were built not only for trade but for the movement of troops. War was a curse, but it also became a force that shaped civilizations. Imagine standing on a battlefield of the ancient world. The air thick with dust, thousands of men lined with shields and spears, war cries echoing across the plains. Chariots thunder by arrows blot out the sun, and the ground shakes under the march of armies. This was not a video game, not a movie scene. This was real. Blood, fear, and survival written into the soil of our ancestors. This was the first war of the world. What is most haunting is how familiar it all feels. Thousands of years have passed, weapons have changed from stones to nuclear missiles, but the reasons remain eerily the same. Power, resources, fear, pride, and survival. The cycle began with the first war and continues to this very day. The story of the world's first war is not just about ancient skeletons or forgotten kings, it is about us. It is about the human nature that still beats within our hearts. The first war of the world was not the last. It was the beginning of a long, unbroken chain of conflicts that stretches across history. From the battles of Alexander the Great to the conquests of Genghis Khan, from the Crusades to the world wars of the 20th century, every conflict is connected to that first spark when humanity chose the path of war. And the question that remains for us today is whether we will ever break free from that cycle, or whether war will remain an eternal shadow following humanity until the very end. The story of the world's first war is the story of who we are. It began with tribes fighting over survival, and it continues now with nations armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy the planet. History shows us the cost of conflict, the destruction, the death, but it also shows us the resilience of humanity to rise again. To understand the future, we must remember the beginning. The first war of the world is not just a distant memory, it is a warning carved into the bones of our ancestors.